Okay.
All right. So as I was saying, I think we are perfectly placed for this evening today, for this talk, especially because given that today is Ada Lovelace Day, and we are going to talk about power of negotiation. So let me just give you a brief overview of what women coding community is. So let me first introduce myself, actually. I'm Madhura, and I'm engineering manager at Paythrough. I'm the lead program coordinator for the mentorship program at Women Coding Community. I'll be your host today, and with me is my co-host Ira, who is going to monitor the chat throughout the session. So if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to drop them in the chat anytime, and we will address those at the end of the session. So here's a brief introduction about Women Coding Community. So we are actually we are building a safe environment for women to thrive in tech. Our mission is to empower women to be at the forefront of technology and innovation. Our vision is to have an inclusive and an equitable society. So we do this by conducting various workshops, events. We connect members with the industry mentors. We foster a very supportive community through events like this meetup. We have career talks and tech talks. We do have a code of conduct. We are committed to a very vibrant and supportive community where women can network, share their experience, foster relationships, irrespective of age, gender, disability, ethnicity, education, status, nationality, race, religion, orientation, even the programming languages. So we don't care about what language you use, but we are quite open and a supportive community. So you can read more about the code of conduct on our website. Let me go to the next slide. So we run a lot of projects and programs. A lot of our successful programs are like mentorship program, the book club, writing club, career club, coding club. So you can scan the QR code here and you can join our Slack channel. We also have different projects like the mock interviews. We support if you are looking for a job and you just want to have a mock interview with us. We do have industry experts who will just take a mock interview for you. We have system design track. You can join the Lead Code Support study group, which can help you improve your coding skills. So we have different projects running. You can volunteer with us. We are always looking for volunteers to organize the events, give tech talks, or write the community blog. We have a newsletter. So if you're interested in volunteering with us, please do scan the QR code and just join our channel. In this case, you would be wondering why join us. So we are a very friendly and, where is it? Sorry, we are a very friendly crowd and we have excellent networking opportunities. You can learn and master leadership skills with us. And there are nice perks of joining us. We have free tickets for events and conferences. And most of all, you get unforgettable emotions and, sort of bonding. We have mentors who have long-term relationships with their mentees. So if you do want to join us, please scan the QR code and join our Slack channel. So that's from my side about Women Coding Community. And let me now just give you a brief introduction about our today's speaker, Kirsty Harland. She is from RedTech. She is the business development manager there. And I think she is very well placed to give us advice and tips on how to negotiate, what should we look at. I think she has some good tips for us, and I think I'll hand it over to Kirsty now. If you can start with a short introduction about yourself and just start your talk. Let me stop sharing my screen for now. And over to you, Kirsty.
Hi everyone, it's nice to meet you all virtually this evening. As Madeira kindly said, I work for a company called RedTech and I am their business development manager. So yes, I've been negotiating, I guess, well over for 15 years now in various roles. I do have a strong sales background spanning over 15 years. So part of that is building relationships and I guess negotiating. So that leads us on to our talk this evening. I came from the automotive background, I should mention. So that is quite a male-dominated sector. And when I moved over into tech, that was something I found that was very similar as well. And I wasn't expecting it to be, but the more conversations that I had, the more similarities I found, and the more women that I spoke to, the more things that were very similar were popping up time and time again. So it's great to be involved with initiatives like the women coding community and various other female-led initiatives in the tech industry, just to continue breaking down some of the things that we're coming across in the tech industry and some of the barriers that are being put in place, some gender biases. So yes, I will lead on to the power of negotiation. I'm going to share my screen so you can all see it. Hopefully that's popped up for you all now.
Yeah,
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Okay, so the power of negotiation, women claiming their worth in tech. So as you probably know, women are underrepresented and underpaid. In the UK, women make up just 17% of the tech workforce. The gender pay gap currently stands at 16% compared to 8% across all other industries. Just a staggering figure, really. Did you know that men are more likely to negotiate? Maybe some of you won't be surprised by that stat, but 57% of men are more likely to negotiate compared to just 37% of women. Also, women hold only 5% of leadership positions in the UK's technology industry. So some quite big stats there for you. But if you take anything away from today, let it be this, that negotiation isn't just about pay. It's about recognizing your worth. It's about amplifying your voice and stepping into the career that you deserve. So let's dive into how we're going to do that today. So this is a little bit about me. As I've just gone through, I'm going to skip through that slide. Our points for discussion this evening. So firstly, understanding market value. And then we're going to do addressing gender norms. And then we're going to do communicating your worth. And then we're going to do negotiation techniques. And bear with me because I've just lost my presentation. Apologies, I have just lost my presentation, so I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way with a printed document instead. So negotiation techniques will be the last point that we discover this evening. So if I go on to research the market, so there's lots of platforms that you can use to do that, but one of the most important ones is probably Indeed or Glassdoor, but they will give you a good basis for doing some benchmarking. Another thing that you can do is talk to people within your network. So if you've got anyone that is working in that career currently, I would reach out to those people. If you're comfortable discussing salaries and salary expectations, please do so. It's one of those things that I don't know why we seem to shy away from having uncomfortable discussions about salary, but I think the more that people are open and transparent about those sorts of things, the more that people understand what their worth is within their industry. Another thing would be to consult with specialized tech recruiters. So a lot of the time, if you're speaking to a tech recruiter, for example, they will have an idea of what various people in that area or in that industry are willing to pay for the position that you're looking for. So they tend to be quite a good one to reach out to as well. Again, keeping in mind that regional pay will vary. So for example, obviously, if you're looking for a role in Sheffield, the role is going to pay obviously significantly differently to maybe a role that you're looking for in London. So take that in mind when you're looking at different pay. Secondly, so what matters to you? So is it purely financial? Are there other things that you want to consider? So are there things like flexible working, for example? Are there share options with the role? Is there, a bigger package to consider? Are they offering professional development or qualifications as part of that package? So really have a think about those things. Is it just numbers, or are there other things that you can negotiate during the process? And then thirdly, work with recruiters. So obviously specialist recruiters, we can give you insights on salary trends, and again, just ask for their advice, because we're bound to know the clients that you're interviewing for, the hiring manager, much better. And we'll have a scope for how much that role and that person is willing to pay for the position. Again, something to consider is that tech recruiters will often negotiate on your behalf. So I would say be transparent with your expectations up front, because that is something that they will do for you. Moving on. So addressing bias and gender norms. So as I mentioned at the start, the gender pay gap is a staggering 16% in the tech industry. And that's something that we really should address. We are working on it, I think, across the sector, and I think that could be better, that number. But as it stands, it's a slow but steady process. Research has shown that biases and gender norms significantly affect women even before they enter the interview room. So that's something, again, that is significantly standing in our way, unfortunately. But again, it's something that we are breaking down as we go along. What I would say is it's not just a matter of experience or talent, but it does seem to be systemic inequities that we're finding. So generally speaking, it's women that are often more, I guess, in caregiving, doing caregiving functions, caregiving responsibilities. So we are looking after maybe younger children more often, aging parents. Women are the ones that I guess tend to take career gaps more. So things like maternity leave, for example, and some of these are some of the things that we find obviously are affecting that gender pay gap across all sectors, but naturally in tech as well. I'll give you a personal example. I was having a successful sales career, and my husband and I planned to have a little boy during the lockdown period. We had our son, and I went on maternity leave. And during that time, I saw colleagues that had very similar sales numbers to myself be promoted, and I took a bit of a career gap because I wanted to spend time with my son while he was young. And I went back into the workforce 3 years later, which is where I'm at in my current role. But during that 3-year time that I was away from the workforce, the people that I'd worked with that were men had gone on to become senior management roles. And a lot of the women that I'd worked with, some of them had gone on to have children themselves and had left the industry because there weren't enough opportunities for them anymore. So I feel like that's one of the reasons that there is a little bit of this gender pay gap still that is getting in the way. One notable phenomenon that I've come across is the confidence gap. So some of you might have heard of this, but women often won't apply for a job unless they meet 100% of the qualifications. So I don't know if you've ever fallen foul of this, but you've seen a job advertised on LinkedIn or on Indeed, and you're ticking all the boxes. Yep, got all that experience, but you'll come across something that, no, I haven't done that. And what women tend to do is write themselves off. And it's something that I've seen firsthand. I've had conversations with friends where people have told me this job it's great for me. Like I tick all these boxes, but they wanted this and I haven't done that. And I'm like, did you apply? No, because I haven't done that. So, and this is why I'd urge someone, no, absolutely 100% still apply for that role, because a lot of the time a man, he's not going to look at that. He's not going to consider those things that he hasn't done. He's going to be thinking, oh, I've done that, I'm going to apply. So that's something that I would definitely say to more women is to put yourself out there 100%. I think it comes down to almost like this internalized belief about our own competence and confidence in being in the room still, where we're just questioning our capabilities, and that can really kind of harm our career long term. So yes, I'll move on to the next slide. And that's about addressing imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome, I'm sure we've all felt it at some point or another in our careers. I actually recently went to another event that was taking place in London, and it was part of the London International Cyber Security event. And there was another Women in Tech initiative taking place. They had 4 panelists, very successful women in management roles, talking about various issues that they're facing across the tech industry. Every single one of them had faced imposter syndrome during their career. It was open up to the audience, and the amount of people that I turned around and saw nodding in the room was staggering. So it's interesting that this is something that we as women are still feeling. Even though we absolutely deserve a place at the table, we still feel imposter syndrome. And that leads me on to the stat that 75% of female executives, according to a report by KPMG, have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their career. So you'll often feel like they're not deserving of your achievements, which again can prevent you from asking for what you're worth if you're going into a negotiation scenario. So how are we going to address imposter syndrome? How are we going to overcome that? So firstly, let's reframe negative thoughts. So you need to banish feelings of feeling like I'm not good enough. Instead, you need to tell yourself that I'm experienced, I'm skilled, and I bring a unique perspective to the table and to this team. Again, create a success portfolio. So this is something I did very early on in my career. I just kept a little folder with my work emails. Yes, if it doesn't have sensitive emails and information, you can send them to your personal email. But I would just keep bits and pieces, and though with positive feedback from clients or customers, any successful projects that I'd been involved in or led, I kept them all in there. And then I would look at those before any negotiation, just to combat any sort of feelings that I was having maybe of inadequacy. And I'd implore people to do the exact same. Speak to mentors and peers. So this is another good one. And again, personal experience, but I worked with someone years ago, and he had such a great energy about him, and he was just a great energy is how I kind of describe him. Very positive and can-do person, and he was a fantastic salesperson himself, and he was someone that I closely aligned myself with early on in my career. But sometimes when I was going to go and to negotiate, and if I just had those niggling little thoughts creeping in of just self-doubt, he was the person that I would put myself in front of. I would put myself in front of him, and I would tell him I'm feeling a little bit, nervous maybe about this deal, and he would hype me up. And I can't stress enough how important having people like that around you are, because naturally, at some point, all of us have those little moments, and it's just about being around the right kind of people, just to kind of remind you and reinforce your strengths to you, and give you an objective viewpoint as well on your value, because they will help ultimately challenge those imposter thoughts as well. And then again, fake it until you make it. We've all heard that expression, right? So using that approach can really help you override imposter syndrome. Just assume the mindset of someone who knows that they belong in that room, and then let your actions follow suit. The likability trap. Now, you may or may not have heard about this before, but essentially, women often find themselves walking a tightrope where being assertive can be seen as aggressive. This is what social psychologists call the double bind. So knowing this is key when you're going into negotiation, because then you can strategize around that and frame your negotiation in a more collaborative way. So using language as an example will show how you're going to benefit the company in a better way. But basically, you'll all know this as well. We receive backlash as women for showing the same assertiveness that is awarded in men. And we see it time and time again. Assertive women are often perceived as less likable. And it's not right, it's not fair, but it can negatively impact our professional growth. And it is a deep-rooted bias that is in social expectations that women should be more nurturing and more accommodating rather than dominant and ambitious, which we all know is not correct, right? So tips for addressing the likability trap. Adopt a collaborative framing. So use phrases like, I believe this will also benefit the team by, or let's find a solution that works well for both of us. Use warmth and strength together. So combine warmth, smiling, maintaining a clear and friendly tone with strength. So clear asks and confident body language. And then rely on data. So that's also really important. So data-driven negotiation focuses the conversation on facts rather than just on feelings. And then I think it's important, I guess, to maybe talk about some techniques for overcoming bias at this point. So we've all seen TED Talks, haven't we? But you'll see how people talk. So they'll stand tall, shoulders back, and they'll use expansive gestures. So it's actually research from Harvard University that shows that these power poses can actually boost your confidence, reduce stress, and therefore makes it a better high stakes negotiation. And again, anchor your value. So begin by stating your accomplishments and the value that you're going to bring before making a monetary ask. So that will create a solid anchor point that the other party will have in mind throughout the negotiation process. When I was doing the research actually for this talk this evening, I came across a lady's name more often than not, and she works in the tech industry as a tech leader, Joanna Zuck, her name is, and she talks about something called the silent nod and silent nod syndrome, which is basically where women agree to terms in meetings without speaking up because we're all silently nodding along with what's happening in the meeting. I see some of you doing it right now. So it happens. But she found that early in her career, she realized she was being paid significantly less than her male peers for the exact same work. It's not right. But by shifting her mindset, by using more assertive communication, by speaking up in meetings and letting her presence be known, she successfully renegotiated her salary twice in that 1 year. So that's a great example that doing these techniques can help, it can lead you to having more success in negotiation. Communicating value. So how do we communicate value? I think now that we've tackled bias, let's move on to this topic. So use I statements instead of we. So instead of saying we achieved a 20% increase in efficiency, say I led a project that resulted in a 20% increase in efficiency. You are going to have to be your own hype man when it comes to negotiation. Nobody else in that room is going to be advocating for you. So you need to be your own hype person and you need to tell them that you led a project. It's all great to talk about teamwork, but when it comes to the negotiation part of the deal, that's where you need to be your own best friend. Be direct and clear. So use a positive, neutral tone. Avoid weakening your position with phrases like, I think, or I'm not sure, but these are important points. Practice pitching. So just like preparing for a presentation, rehearse your pitch. What is your key message? What are the top 3 points that you want to land? So rehearsal will help reduce any anxiety that you feel and it will let you present better with confidence. A good example of this, again, I've mentioned in here, so feel free to take screenshots throughout any of this presentation for the slides. They may be useful to you in the future, but the STAR method. So that is where you describe a situation, the task that you were assigned, the action that you took, and the results that you achieved. And use this structure to highlight achievements that you've done persuasively. Now moving on to negotiation techniques. Use the power of silence. Now, very, very early on in my career, I learned this technique. I think, in fact, it was probably my first week as a sales trainee where I had a crash course in how to do this by my sales manager. And I didn't know that was coming. So I sat there practicing some role play with him, and after he pitched, he just went quiet. And I'd known this gentleman for a week at this point, and he just sat there and went quiet. And I didn't know what was happening, but naturally, just to feel the awkwardness and the uncomfortableness of the silence, I continued with what I thought he wanted and said a number. And he said, "You failed." And I was like, "I don't understand. How have I failed? I've like, countered, we've come up with a response." He goes, "You filled the silence." And I didn't really get it. So he explained. And then we practiced a few more times, and we got used to sitting in silence up to a minute at some points. And that was what essentially he called that the power of silence. But basically, what you're doing is you're stating your number. You then stay silent, and that will put pressure on the other party to fill the silence. And it will often obviously lead them to meet your ask or come closer. It's a really common technique that is used in negotiation. And we used to call it, he who speaks first loses. And to this day, it's still something that I do. However, there is a con to this, because while silence can be powerful, it can also become uncomfortable, as I've just mentioned. So practice this in low stakes settings, practice it with a family member, a friend, the dog, it doesn't matter. But just get used to sitting in silence with somebody first. Prepare for concessions. So know in advance what you're willing to would give up, essentially. So if you can't get the salary increase, could you negotiate for more annual leave, or maybe a better job title instead? Again, approach this approach. So this can help overcome some resistance, but if the other party is purely profit driven, it's not going to land as well. So you may need to tailor your approach accordingly. Avoid apologies. I was literally only speaking to a CEO this week where he told me about 2 women in his team that had apologized in a sales environment. And he had spoken to them afterwards and said, "Do not apologize. Do not feel the need to apologize." It's really important that you don't say things like, "I'm sorry to ask this." So remember from your vocabulary, things like apologizing are going to weaken your stance. And we don't want to come off weak in negotiation. We want to be confident and strong. And body language. So keep your body language open, maintain eye contact, do not cross your arms, don't slouch, just lean slightly forward to show engagement and that you're listening. Now, so techniques for a new job. So we can talk about the techniques for going into a new position, and we can talk about techniques for your current position as well. And go into a little bit more detail about both of those. So mentioning salary if it's not on the job specification. Again, that's something that we see quite often, right? I mean, you just happen to go onto LinkedIn or Indeed and you'll see plenty of roles that salary competitive, salary negotiable, may not even list the salary at all. So do you apply? Oh, yeah, of course. So again, hear different things for when you should mention this, but this is something that working for RedTech, they have said early on, you need to find out how much the role is paying. I mean, simply, you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to get halfway through a process and find that you are absolutely miles out. So I think early establishment of how much the salary is on offer is better. What you can do is obviously you can reach out to the talent manager after you've got a mutual interest and they're looking to interview you and find out about the salary structure. You could ask HR, or again, if you're going for a tech recruiter, then it might be worth having that conversation with the tech recruiter that you're dealing with directly. Handling lowball offers. So don't reject immediately. Say something like, based on my research and the value that I bring, I was expecting something in the range of, say, £50,000 to £60,000. Could you help me understand how you've arrived at this figure? And then again, so using the bottom end of a salary range as a benchmark. So when negotiating, if an employer provides a salary range, again, you might have seen something like that where it says maybe £50,000 to £70,000. This means the range should inform your starting point. So with the goal to get closer to the top. So for instance, if a salary is listed, like I said, at 50 to 70, you should interpret 50 as the absolute minimum that you would accept and aim for somewhere above that. So start your negotiations close to the upper end, unless there's a compelling reason for you to accept less. Things where this might be a little bit different. So we see it at RedTech, public sector roles. They rarely give out top bands, as they'll often want you to work towards that top band as part of appraisals and reviews. So it may not be personal if a public sector company comes back to you and doesn't give you that top band initially. Again, ask the agency that you're going through, or ask HR, what would I need to get that top band? So be direct, ask, what do you need to get that top band? Because ultimately, you want the top band. Again, know your walk away point. So you should have a minimum number in mind that you're willing to accept very early on. And if that doesn't meet the threshold, you should just be prepared to walk away. I think that's something that does require a bit of planning in advance. So like we've talked about, researching the market, calculating your needs, so not just the salary, but what the whole package would look like, having that minimum in mind as well. So as an example, if you're offered £45,000 for the role, but your walk away is £50,000, be prepared to just to thank them for their time and move on. Negotiations should not just be about landing any job, but you want the right job and you want the right package. So that's really important, because you don't want to find yourself just accepting it, you're not happy, and then you find yourself in 3-4 months time actually back on Indeed or Reed looking again for jobs because you didn't feel like you got a good deal, you didn't get what you wanted. So I would say know when to walk away. And then responding to rejections. So naturally, we do get no's in life. Not every negotiation is going to end up successful, but don't walk away from that defeated. If you do accept, then ask, what specific milestones would I need to be hitting in order to be eligible for a review in 6 months' time? So have that noted, so that that's something that you can bring up, I guess, in future negotiations when you're in the role. Moving on to current role. So you may be in a current role, you may not even be thinking about leaving your role, you're happy in the company, but you're maybe thinking about how you can get a pay rise, I guess. So don't be afraid to speak up. So speak out in meetings. I would say that having a different viewpoint is absolutely invaluable. A woman can have really unique perspective on things, and the same can be true for minorities as well. So diversity of thought is powerful, and if you're seen to be engaging and collaborative and coming up with new and fresh ideas, it can really help raise your profile. So I would definitely say one of the most common places for that to happen is going to be in meetings. So definitely speak up. Find out typical guidelines. So speak to HR and consult your employee handbook. So another thing to maybe think about was, what was the pay for someone who left when the role was re-advertised? It's not something that you think about, but it might be worth something looking up. Again, when can you get a salary increase? Most organizations will have an annual or even a biannual review. So make sure that you're using these to your advantage, and that you're actually going into those meetings with an idea in mind that you are going to negotiate, and doing your due diligence and research in advance. And then asking for a salary increase following new responsibilities. So this comes up quite often again, and only just recently I spoke to a family member actually, and she had been given some new responsibilities where she was looking after a more junior member of staff and training them and essentially managing them. And I asked her if she had a pay increase, and she said no. It's something that I spoke to one of our directors about, and said, I find it really unusual that she seems, really doesn't want to ask for the pay increase. And we had a little chat about it at work. And one of the things that came out was that a lot of the time managers will give people more responsibility to test the waters, just to see how they go, to see whether they can handle the new responsibilities. So it might not necessarily come with an immediate pay increase, but it could be that the role is going to change. There may be a promotion, on the horizon, or a pay increase with that. Other times employers will just push their luck and expect you to take on new responsibilities and pay you the same. So if you find yourself in that scenario, you need to have like some clear understanding that you're going to be paid essentially for having those new responsibilities, but try to frame it in a positive way. So don't go in demanding and bang this, but try framing it in a way like, given my additional responsibilities and successes in these areas and managing X member of staff, I'd like to revisit my current salary. And then that way you're doing it in a more positive, collaborative manner. If it's denied, ask what more that you could do. So could you share what areas I need to develop to meet the requirements for a raise? Would be a good way of asking. That will give you a clear goal and demonstrate that you're open to feedback. Again, make sure that you put that into writing after that meeting. So follow up with, thank you very much for seeing me, and given obviously our conversation, should I meet X, Y, Z targets? Would be obviously open to a salary review in 6 months' time. Should I meet these? So again, make sure that goes into writing so you've got something to follow up on in that time frame. And then consider options of leaving. So if all else fails, do consider that. You don't want to be somewhere forever that's not going to value you and pay you accordingly. And ultimately, beware of counter offers. This is something that we tell people about almost daily, if I'm honest. Studies actually show that 60 to 80% of people who accept a counter offer end up leaving within the first year anyway, because the issues that they had were underlying and they've remained unresolved. It wasn't just down to pay. It also puts you at risk of future redundancy and issues if the company was to restructure, because you've kind of put a gun to the company's head that you're going to leave. So again, it's something that we talk about quite often in recruitment, that it is something to be aware of. Moving on. So to summarize, so it's important to obviously understand your value, know what your skills are and know what they're worth in the current market. Key is to address biases. So be aware of imposter syndrome and likability traps. Use collaborative framing, as we've discussed this evening. Remember to be assertive. So that doesn't have to mean that you're being aggressive, but communicate your value. Communicate with I statements. Be clear, be concise, be warm, be friendly, smiling, and then have a strategy. So whether you're negotiating for a new role or promotion, timing and preparation are crucial. If you don't prepare, then you obviously prepare to fail. And finally, I just want to finish on a quote by the legend that is Sheryl Sandberg. She says, "We hold ourselves back in ways both big and small by lacking in self-confidence, by not raising our hands, and by pulling back when we should lean in." So I think today we've covered the core strategies for negotiation and negotiating your value in the tech industry. So starting obviously understanding your market worth, overcoming the gender biases, and using assertive communication techniques. So remember to research your position thoroughly, leverage the data and to communicate your value, and practice timings very carefully. So whether you're going away and you're looking at new roles, or whether you're looking to negotiate a raise, have a clear walk-away point, and don't shy away from addressing lowball offers as well. But to conclude, in essence, the most important thing, I guess, to remember is that negotiation is a journey, not a one-time event. I mean, you're probably going to be doing it a lot in your life, not just in in regards to work as well. I only just not so long ago negotiated on a new house, so that's where negotiation came in really handy. And my husband, in all honesty, took a lot of the back seat in that, because that is my forte. So negotiation will help you. So you might as well get good at it, right? Every no that you're going to hear is only going to be an opportunity to learn, to hone the skill and refine your approach. By claiming your worth, you're not just advocating for yourself, you're paving the way for the future women in tech, and you're lowering that ladder for those women to climb up. So kind of going off the back of what Sheryl Sandberg said about leaning in, I think we all need to lean in together. We need to negotiate fearlessly, and we need to claim the value that we bring to this ever-evolving industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was just brilliant. Thank you so much, Kirsty. It was just fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm so sorry about the technical issue of losing my presentation. We had to go back to the old manual paper.
It was really, really good, because I have sat on both sides of the table. I am an engineering manager. I have dealt with issues where, people ask for a pay, but there are constraints, and it's just, it was a really brilliant talk. I mean, the tips that you have given are really very useful, and I'm sure everyone can, make use of them.
Yes,
so that was fantastic. I think we have time for questions.
Oh, good.
Does anybody have any question which they just want to talk to Kirsty about anything? We have some questions in the chat, but before we pick that up, if anybody wants to directly just ask something or speak about anything, I mean, feel free to just raise your hand. Ira, did you say something?
Sorry, I wanted to raise my hand and speak directly.
Yeah, you don't
I think
have to raise your hand. I mean, it's just assuming there is a big queue. So,
again,
Sakshi
thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So again, thank you very much, Kirsty, for that talk. It was really good. I was able to learn a lot. I do have a question, and I sort of summarized in the chat as well, but I figured maybe I could also explain better. So my question basically is when you were talking about negotiating within your current role. So say, for example, in the case of graduate roles, so, graduate schemes where you are maybe a year or 2 years, and the salaries are usually fixed at the start of the scheme or at the start of the year. For example, if someone is in that role where they have maybe previous experience and they discover maybe 3 months or 6 months into the role that they are bringing in a lot more value compared to the pay that they are currently on. And because the graduate scheme salaries are at the start, so you don't really have room for negotiation when you're in the role. How would you, or what advice would you give for someone that wants to negotiate that increase in the pay, considering that it's a graduate role, so there are those constraints, and how would you reckon they should approach it?
So I would definitely still speak to your line manager or to HR. I would speak to HR probably first, just to find out how that structure worked, to find out if there was any scope for review, for negotiation on the salary, if there was the potential for a raise after, like I said, after 6 months, after a year. As you said, it's a graduate role, but still, you have a place in the workplace. So that's still a conversation that I would have 100%. And I would mention it with your line manager as well. So what targets do you need to be, like I said earlier, reaching in order to be recognized for a review? But I would have that all documented as well. Like I said, definitely put it into writing. And maybe if it's not a financial package, are there other things that they can offer as well? If it's something that you've come across quite recently as a graduate?
Yeah, so like personally for me, I do have like some previous experience, but like the graduate role is more of like an encompassing one. But like
Mm,
maybe like a few months into the role, you realize that you are doing a bit more, and it does seem a little similar to like your previous roles, and the composition doesn't feel like on the level. Obviously you're learning something new as well, because like it's not just what you've been
of
doing
course.
before. There's a lot more, but you just
Yeah.
feel like maybe there's room for you to negotiate more
Mm.
as you contribute more value.
Okay. I mean, going back to obviously it being a graduate role, I mean, I would probably, instead of maybe asking financial conversations, but maybe ask if they will they'll pay for professional qualifications, depending on the the industry that you're in. But if you're in tech, I would be asking for professional qualifications. If it's a graduate position and you want to continue doing your development and your learning, that's what I would hone in on. If you're thinking there's not a lot of scope for pay already, I'd push for the qualifications, or maybe again greater pay down the line. So have that put into writing that you want a pay increase in the future.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
We have Sakshi. Actually, she has a question. But before I move on to Sakshi, I think, Christy, if you can stop presenting, maybe we can see you better as you're talking and explaining.
We can just see Cheryl for the time being.
Yeah, Sakshi, can you please ask your question?
Hey, Kirsty, thank you so much for the presentation. My question is more around like understanding the market pay. So there's obviously good platforms like Glassdoor or Blind or pay, Fishbowl and stuff like that. But there's a lot of like conflicting information sometimes. Like people put in random numbers. Like, how do you actually like get a sense of market ranges for your current role? Like, what's the best way to understand that?
But what, for your current position that you're in, or for the
Number of years of experience? Like, for example, like I have 4 years of experience, and I want to
Mhm.
understand like what is an average expected salary in such a role. Well, how would you approach something like that?
I think it's quite a wide scope with something like that, because there's so many, like I said, variances. If like I said, if it's a public sector company, if it's a regional area,
I mean,
like
just to make it easier, like even if you assume, suppose, like if you look at big tech only, like just to make it very easy, right? So we're saying you're only looking at like 10 companies or something. Would you usually go to like Glassdoor and stuff? Because I feel like sometimes people just put in like random numbers, which really skew the numbers there.
Yeah, I mean, probably a good thing to mention at this point is recruitment companies again. So recruitment companies often have like salary surveys. So that's something that you can find out. Again, I would recommend always reaching out to a tech recruiter and having a conversation with a tech recruiter, because they have that inside knowledge. This is their job. So they do this all the time. I speak with lots of women in the in the industry with different roles, and I already kind of know how much we should be asking companies for a person based on how many years experience they have, just because of what the market trends are. If it's a client-led market, it's more candidate-led market. So I think reaching out to them is probably not a bad idea, just to find out a bit more information. I know that sometimes you can go onto places like Glassdoor and you can either get really specific information, and sometimes it can be a bit more vague. But I would just say to try to speak to as many people as possible in your network as well. And like I said, also those surveys are quite useful because there's a lot of information out there about
that makes sense. Are these surveys something that like you should kind of contact a recruiter to like look into?
Yeah, like I said, it's something that again we're really knowledgeable on.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
and just to follow up on that, since you mentioned the recruiter point, are there any scenarios where we should not go to a recruiter? Like is it always just good to go to tech recruiter for like job opportunities and stuff as well?
That's an interesting one, because I'm pretty sure that my director's on this call, so I don't think I'm going to be like dissuading you from going to a tech recruiter. But yeah, I think that obviously by using a tech recruiter, it can it can really help, because a lot of the time, a lot of companies will use tech recruiters directly. So even necessarily advertise the role themselves, it will be through the tech recruiter. So sometimes you'll find out about companies and positions through them.
Okay.
If you're not necessarily suitable for a position, there could be another position with another client that they feel like maybe your skill set is better suited to. So I'll give you an example. When we obviously speak to candidates, we'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes getting to know you, and we'll find out a whole number of things about you, and we'll get a real good sense of your experience, what you're looking for, your career trajectory, and then obviously when we're going to our client, we've got that information like to hand already, and we will negotiate on your behalf as well. But I would say, yeah, it's always good to
I
speak.
think I can add a bit on that, because I have got in touch with Kirsty because I was applying, and I think she has really guided me a lot on that process. So in fact, she has given me some advice which probably, has come in quite handy when I was looking even for a job afterwards. So things didn't work out for whatever job I had the opportunity for. But then, her advice did stay with me, and it has helped me. So I would definitely say, yes, it does make sense.
Yeah,
Thank you both.
So we do have questions. Ira, do you want to take some questions from the chat and read them out?
Yes. So we have a question from Mavi. So she's asking, like, in your experience, how did you manage the gap between jobs in order to get interviews? So like when you took like leave for caring, like how did you manage to explain that gap when you were interviewing for like new roles?
I was really honest, if I'm being completely honest. So I was very transparent about that. I updated my LinkedIn, and put on LinkedIn that I'd had a career break down to full-time parenting. And when I spoke to Rebecca, who's the director, and had my interview with her, I explained that I'd been on a career gap because my son's only going to be little for a short period of time, and that was something that I made the decision to do. I wanted to be at home. I wanted to raise him. We didn't have family in the locality, and it would have meant putting him into childcare, which I'm sure is very expensive, as I'm sure most of you know. And also, I just felt it was something that I wanted. I wanted to be with him. So we made our own adjustments to accommodate that as a family. So I was honest and told her that. And I think that was respected more than me trying to, make up a reason. I would never encourage lying to, an employer or someone interviewing you. I would, yes, you don't have to tell people everything, but yeah, I would be transparent.
So in that respect, like even I took a career gap when I had my son. That was quite some time back. So don't ask me how many years back, but it was some time back. But what I would like to know is, it does put you on a back foot, right? Because you're coming out of, a gap that you have taken for your maternity leave and everything. It does put you on a back footing. And how do you then sort of, lose the negotiation? Like at that point, you want to get back into tech or any industry. Would you just sort of, at that point, what would you do? What would your advice be?
I think to kind of go back to what you've done, your accomplishments. Like, just because you've had time out, it doesn't mean that all of those things that came before that didn't exist.
Right.
So, a lot of the things that I talked about with Rebecca, when, I spoke to her initially, were the things that I'd achieved during my, previous role prior to going onto maternity leave and taking that career gap, and those successes in those roles, and how I'd had excellent client feedback and customer feedback, so things that were relevant for the role that I was going into. But I was just essentially reminding her of my value and the achievements that I'd had. So that's something I would definitely kind of bring bring up during an interview, just like you would do if you hadn't taken a career gap. I think, you know, with things like, you know, maternity leave or taking care of children, you know, they are really common. You know?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that are interviewing, they understand that. You know, they've got young children, like Rebecca herself, she had, you know, young children at one point, so she was understanding, you know, that happens. That's life. it's part of being a woman, that we, you know, we warrant having that time off if we want it, you know, to be with our children.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to also share on that experience, and not on the maternity side of things, but more of like, say, unexpected gaps. For example, I was working as a front-end engineer before, and then I moved to the UK for my master's. And then after I finished my master's, because of like the job market with tech and everything and all of the layoffs, it was a bit difficult for me to like get back into like the job industry. So I did have that gap between finishing my degree and then getting my first job in the UK. So basically what I tried to do was, during that time, I was doing things like volunteering for Women Who Code London, now Women Coding Community. I was quite involved in the open source project. So that way I was able to keep owning my technical skills while I was still applying for jobs. And then for the few callbacks that I got from all of the thousands of applications that I made, when they try to like point out that gap, I try to explain that like during that time, this is what I've been doing. So not really like focusing on, oh, I've not just been able to get a job because of the job market, but I do have that gap. I cannot change that, but this is what I've been doing during that time. And that doesn't undermine the value that I will bring to this role. So that was sort of like how I was able to like interpret that gap in a way that doesn't seem like like an handicap for me, right? Like something that would put me like, yeah. So that would be how I would advise anyone to manage it if it's not related to maternity leave or just an unexpected gap, if that makes sense.
It's good advice, actually, because we often have people that have got gaps, and it's one of the things that we may use when we speak to new clients is that they've had a gap, but maybe they've got a gap, but in that time frame they've learned new technologies. And we'll encourage, obviously, candidates to go away and to learn new technologies if they are going through the recruitment process and maybe they've been unemployed for a little bit of time. Like, catch up on some of your skills, because obviously when you go into an interview, you are going to be asked to demonstrate some of those skills potentially anyway if you go for technical assessments. So that's definitely something that I would encourage if you are having a little bit of a career break at the moment, is, you know, to kind of catch up with your current technology skills that you've got and maybe learn some new ones as well. But also, you know, volunteering is another good thing, and that looks great on a CV. I've done it. I know candidates that have volunteered as well during gaps, and also network. So just network as much as possible. Get to various different events. There's lots of obviously different, you know, female-led initiatives. I can't go to, you know, it seems like a large-scale event now without some sort of, you know, D&I event popping up. But I would say that grow your LinkedIn network, connect with as many people as possible in your industry. And yeah, that's probably what I would do if I was to be in that position.
Thank you. We have one other question. So is there a book that made an impact on how you negotiate or sell yourself? So like, if you could recommend one, there is a recommendation in the chat, but which one would you personally recommend?
Oh, that's really difficult because there's loads. Never Split the Difference is a good book, by Chris Voss. But that's probably a good one. He was a former FBI hostage negotiator. But yeah, that's a really good it's a really good read, actually. But yeah,
that's the one that's recommended as well in the chat.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, someone mentioned that in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, let me think of another one then. The Women Don't Ask book, has that been mentioned in the chat?
No, I think it was just they never split the difference.
Okay, I'd have to double check the author, but it's a book called Women don't ask. I will find the information if anyone wants it. I mean, just have a quick Google. But again, that's a really good book, and that's more, I guess, on like social conditioning and like the barriers that are put in place to prevent women from negotiating more effectively. But that's a good book. If someone linked it, is it this one?
Yeah, I think so.
Say
Yeah.
who it's by.
Thanks, Karina. There's one more question from Prabha. Can you share any tips on negotiating with startups to balance salary with equity?
I'm sorry, Madhura, I missed the last bit of that.
Can you share any tips on negotiating with startups to balance salary with equity?
That's an interesting one. A startup, I guess, as in their brand new company. I mean, get as much equity as possible, right? That would probably be the best advice. To get as much equity as they can in the business. You're talking about someone going into a startup, I assume.
Yeah, I'm assuming. I don't know if Prabha is still around.
Yeah.
Prabha,
Yeah,
if
so
you want to
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically what I've seen is when trying to negotiate with startups, they have like a upper limit on how much they can pay, but they are more open to like equity. They have like the salary portion is fixed, the benefits are fixed, but it's only the equity that you can negotiate. And I think what happens is the salary might be on the lower end of like the range for the job title. So basically how to like deal with that, because that there's only a certain amount of pay that you can get with this entity, but there's like a future prospect of like equity and stuff, so it's a bit tricky on how to negotiate with startups specifically.
Is this something that you found yourself in recently?
Yeah. So I've been searching for a job for a bit, and I think with startups I've seen the role that I'm looking for, they pay on the lower end, but they are open to like more equity, which it's very like it's not very like so I'm not sure if I
think
when to walk away and when to stay.
I probably want to have a look at, I guess, then their numbers maybe in a bit more detail. I'd probably ask, I guess, more money if their performance wasn't great, because sometimes equity promises don't always materialize. I think that would kind of be my advice, to enter with caution, of course, if it is a startup, but I'd be trying to do as much research on them as possible. One of the things that we even do is just have go on LinkedIn and have a look at the company's performance, even on LinkedIn. That's something that we do all the time in tech recruitment, just to kind of give us a little bit of a baseline for the company. But of course, if you're interviewing, there's direct questions that you can ask the startup for more information. But yeah, I'd probably be going down the route of asking for more money over equity if the numbers aren't looking particularly strong.
All right.
I think Rebecca has put in quite a good message saying that, look at the previous successes of the founders. And so that can give you an indication whether the startup is going to be successful or not. It doesn't guarantee, but it gives you an indication.
Yeah, and get an agreement in place. So, I mean, if the startup doesn't grow and things don't materialize, I would have an agreement in place with them early on. Definitely.
Yeah, that's very helpful, actually. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, so I think we have overrun by 10 minutes, and it was really good talk. If we don't have any more questions, please leave a feedback. I have added the feedback form, and just leave a feedback for us so that we can improve the next time.
I didn't add my LinkedIn. I just realised. Sorry, Madhura. I know that you mentioned it earlier. Now I've remembered that I didn't actually add it into the into the presentation.
Oh,
Yeah.
pop in the chat actually.
Yeah, I would also add it to like a summary of the events that would share on our Slack as well.
Brilliant.
But I've just dropped the link.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
anybody can. All right. Thank you so much. It was good discussion. Fantastic. And hope to see you all soon in the next
Thank
career talk.
you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Can you stop recording?